King is on the way. Marilyn Wood. Wonderful. Hi. And Aaron Brewington. All right.
Charlotte's still on the beach.
I'm still on the beach. I'll be 10 soon.
Just wait until Gavin Newsom gets at you.
It'll be a virtual tan.
He
Virtual
can't
tan.
he can't catch me.
Amazing with the wind that your hair is just looks perfect.
That's amazing. Yes, it isn't.
Hank Walter, we want to visit you in the IMU soon.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd love to be there too, Al. Or I'd love to be there too, Aaron.
Yeah.
It's eerily quiet in there.
Yeah. Doesn't feel right without people in it, does it?
No.
Hollow.
Maybe Dave Meyer
How do you increase the volume?
and Steve Engel.
I've been joking with people, Aaron, but it's true. There are a couple corridors I went down the other day that
How
I
do you
never knew.
increase the volume?
I never knew they had motion detectors on the lights.
Oh,
They've just always been on before.
yeah.
Right.
Oh,
So what does the frangipani look like?
It's almost done.
almost done.
Yeah, I think we're waiting on a control panel for the lights, and they had to redo the stain on the wooden stage. I think it looks like a nicer and more technologically up to date of the version of the old frangipani. So there's more wood. On say some of the walls, both by the entrance and the opposite to that, behind part of the stage. Different railings, different brand new wood floor, so it's not showing decades of wear and tear.
Is the stage still as high?
You know, it looks officially, I don't know, but it sure looks lower to me.
Yeah.
It looks more like 20 inches than whatever it was before. So maybe
Yeah.
even 15 or so.
Hank?
And
I
I
have a
presume
question.
the sound system will be better.
The sound system will be much better. I posted, and so will the video projection. I posted on the Rotary webpage, I don't know, maybe a month ago, what it looks like. There are now speakers on each, I think it's each of the columns, maybe it's every other column, for instance, that are built in. So really, it's bringing the technology up to date. That was one of our goals.
Wonderful. Yeah, welcome Mike Baker, Becky Jesmer, Chris Michael Morrison, Jean Emery, hello, Rex Hillary. All right. And so we get 38 people here so far. So Jane, you get to see everyone filing in.
2 screens.
Right.
At the time.
Attendance is measured by how many screens we can fill up now.
Natalie, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks for asking.
Okay.
Natalie. Hey, Hank, I had a question about the frangipani room. Are you
Yep.
there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. I'm just curious about the remodeling. I went to my first formal dance there in 1963. Don't you think this is sure?
Military ball.
I missed the last part of what you said.
I said I went to my first formal dance there in 1963 as a freshman, and I just wonder if you weren't maybe a little hasty on that remodel thing.
Maybe he'll give you a part of the old floor.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Once
Well,
every
it's
60
terrible.
years, whether it needs it or not. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, well,
We're trying to work our way through the building, kind of a chunk at a time, bring it up to speed. Although this latest economic downturn is going to kind of slow things down a bit.
Seems like
I
a good
want
time for
to
it.
welcome Eva Johnson. Hello. That Owen's daughter from Moscow, right?
Oh, really?
Yep.
Is
All
she-
right.
is
Just
she-
keeping that international thing going.
Yeah, we want to have at least one international visitor every week.
Love it.
Yeah. And Jean Dayton is here. Hi, Jean. Judy Schroeder. All right.
Hello to Megan
And
Thompson.
Megan Thompson. Great.
Nice to see you.
Yeah.
Good to see you too. I'm excited.
Lance Everly and Phil Eskew.
Normally
And all-
Amy comes, so I'm excited to be here today from Wonder Lab.
And usually Megan, Amy.
Well, you know,
Delighted.
you guys can all come at once now.
That's true. That's true. Maybe we will.
Yeah, no, really, you'd be welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we have the third screen starting up.
We
Okay,
add her to a screen.
and Matt Stitzinger, welcome.
Thanks, Aaron. How are you?
Okay, you're
Good.
no big news yet?
Yeah, we've made a decision on our scholarship winners, so look forward.
Or
to
that news, I meant on the personal side.
No, not on the personal side. Hopefully soon. Hopefully
So
soon.
you'll probably be here next week to do the program?
We'll see. Depending on, yeah, that's. I guess that part's not up to me. I guess we'll see. We're supposed. I
It's
should
not.
be here.
Most
to
things
be.
aren't up to you anymore, right?
Right.
Is this a baby,
So-
Matt?
Yes. Yes. My son. Our son.
Nice.
You have a child?
Yeah, we're excited.
Do they let you in the hospital?
So far. So we hope that continues.
Is this your first child?
It is. Yes.
Well, that's exciting.
Thank you, Charlotte. Yes, we're really
Yes.
excited.
We want to welcome Gene Dayton of the Bloomington North Club, who's joined us. And Gene, as you may know, for 5 years was the chair of the Bloomington Rotary Toast. Welcome, Gene.
Okay, Michael, there's still people waiting to get in?
No, everybody's been let in so far, but still a couple people like that's just connecting them up.
Okay, well, why don't we get started?
Yeah.
I just want to ring the bell. And let's see. Well, Ellen, I'm going to call on you pretty soon. So I want to welcome everyone to the Bloomington Rotary Club's weekly celebration of service for April 28th, 2020. I'm Aaron Davis, the current club president, and it's just great to have everyone here. Great to see you all, even those of you who don't have appearances and only have names. But you'll populate your screens soon, I'm sure. So it's great to have you, including our special guests. Ellen Barker will now give a unusual and wonderful reflection after leading the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay. Okay. Pledge allegiance
To the flag.
to the flag of the United States
of
America.
of America,
Choose the
and to the
republic
republic
for which
for which
which
it
stands
one
one nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
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 indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty,
liberty
justice,
and justice
For all.
for all.
And now, Alan Barker, senior lecturer at the IU School of Jacobs School of Music and director of music entrepreneurship and career development.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I have something that I'm going to share with you now. So we'll go ahead and just play it and see if this works. Hi, everyone. I thought I might talk about some of my personal history and something that I've been meditating on over the past few weeks. How new beginnings in times of intense turmoil and change can open us sometimes unexpectedly to deep humanity. As many of you probably know, I was born and raised in South Africa during the apartheid era, an era in which racism and segregation were embedded in the country's constitution. 1959, the year of my birth, was just a decade after the Afrikaans nationalist government came to power, replacing a government that had attempted to reconcile differences between the two white minorities, those English and Afrikaans, since 1910, following the Boer War. So despite the situation, or perhaps because of it, I actually had a very happy first world upbringing with all the trappings of a life, with roots of my father in England and Ireland and my mother in France. Some ways, we were a typical liberal family with a deeply felt sense of service and faith, service to the community, albeit a secluded one. In my early years, the black people I came across were mostly domestic workers whose music I loved. Durban also had a very large Indian, and still does, expatriate community, and I probably saw more Indians than I did Zulu people, who made up 80% of the population of the province at that time. So I had a very secluded upbringing. That said, my father was a political activist under the radar while teaching and working on the faculty at one of the two major black medical schools in the country. And I came across Stephen Biko, who you may know the name of, as a medical student. My father was one of his mentors, and my father also took the South African Medical and Dental Council to court over Biko's very, very tragic death. And then my father represented the same organization years later in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So it was a life of contrast and a life of contradiction. Fast forward to my undergraduate years in Cape Town, and the floodgates of curious questioning of authority came pouring in with the realization that I had been living in a cultural and political lie. The inequality and brutality of the world around me was suddenly horrific. As I engaged with the wider sense of what South Africa was, I just rebelled, like many of the students around me. This was a time of massive political upheaval in the country. There were riots, there were bombs, very scary, and the students on campus refused to go to class, and we spent many weeks trying to re-educate ourselves at one time. As I participated in the demonstrations and strikes, I knew the world around me was changing forever. Out of those times of immense turmoil, there were no maps for the future and no way of going back to the fake stability of the past. All of this led me to a deep yearning for political and cultural reconciliation that has really stayed central to my life. While still studying Western classical music at the University of Cape Town, which I loved, I jumped into learning about African traditional music, which I also loved, and really was looking for a place in which I could be more meaningfully connecting to the world, speaking as an artist and speaking truth to that moment. Despite the deep suffering and anger, the bombs and rebellion, now, so many years later, the things we think of as we look back to those dark days are striking to me in their deep humanity. For instance, Nelson Mandela, one of the wisest, most powerful human leaders we know of, was in prison then, unable to be heard or seen by anyone. We couldn't even see his photograph, yet he prevailed and became the healer of the nation, and in many ways, parts of the world. The truth and reconciliation that I spoke about, a process of healing that inspired the world, could not have been imagined during the time that I was there, time of such pain, hatred, and suffering. And then musicians, Johnny Clegg, somebody who would become South Africa's most compelling storyteller, was a folk artist, an ethnomusicologist who was known to just a handful of people around him in Durban. And then, as you probably know, Ladysmith Black Mambazo, amazing a cappella group, was also in Durban, barely eking out a living before they collaborated with Paul Simon and then, as you know, became world famous. So as I think back to that turmoil, my takeaway today really is that there was no way of knowing how it would work out except that those resisting the old God believed in the fundamental goodness of humanity, believed in truth and justice, believed in a commitment to ways of living that benefit all, and in many ways believed in the Rotary four-way test. Fast forward, and where we are now, living in a world of intense upheaval yet again, a time of change without certainty to show us the way. Alongside the coronavirus, we also have a rising sense that the environment is in deep distress. Political upheaval is sort of out there, and we're mired in financial uncertainty, and our deep yearning for reconciliation, political, cultural, and personal, seems to have no map. So where will this take us? Who will be our heroes? And what will we remember as the most inspiring moments of our time today? I guess it's too early to tell, but here are a few signs. With physical distancing, we seem to be listening, watching, creating in ways that feel different. As we connect through Zoom today, we're connecting in an unexpected way and creating community. And while musicians and other artists shudder at the idea of a world forever changed, they're also creating in the most amazing ways. So I'll leave you with a few quick examples. Here's a South African high school singing Alleluia.
She tied you to her kitchen chair. She broke your throne and she cut your hair. And from your lips she drew them. Hallelujah.
Here's a group of Jacob School of Music students performing together.
There's only so much you can control. Belief in lies has taken its toll. But never fear, just step up on go. And so you can go, but you better stay home.
You can call my telephone, I'll be right here. Alone at home, maybe you are home alone too. Call me on FaceTime, you'll know what to do. Oh, I'm not alone, I'm alone with you.
And I want to introduce you to this amazing composer, Eric Whitaker, who over the past 10 years has been thinking about what we call today network art, or network arts, creating an incredible choir out of musicians who are from everywhere in the world. Thank you.
Wow.
Wow.
That was beautiful.
No
Thank
word.
you.
That was incredible.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, very powerful. So moving on, I'd like to introduce some of our guests who haven't been introduced especially. But wow, there's a very powerful piece. Let's see, Jim Bright, I know you already announced Jean Dayton, and we have Melissa Stone here from the Sunrise Club.
Yeah, I would just ask if there are any other visiting Rotarians with us here today. Okay, welcome Jean and welcome Melissa. Thank you, Aaron, back to you.
Okay, then Owen has someone to introduce.
My daughter, Eva, who is in Moscow, locked down.
Moscow, Russia, not Idaho.
Right.
How are you doing, Eva?
It's been an interesting time. Just, the city is supposed to be locked down, but I look out over a major intersection and there's a lot of traffic. So either there are more essential folks that I'm aware of, or Russians don't follow rules.
That could be.
Hard to believe.
One more time?
Steve, what were you saying?
I just said it's hard to believe that they wouldn't be truthful.
Right.
Eva, thank you so much for being here. We're absolutely delighted. And thank you, Owen, for bringing these family connections and these international connections. They're both wonderful. Rotary is about family too. So,
Aaron, we've got Len Tiemann with us too from the Bloomington Sunrise Club. Welcome, Len.
Excellent. Welcome, Len. Okay. Anyone else who's noted or hasn't been noted yet who's visiting?
Ray Briggs from the Bedford Club. Thanks, Jim, for the invite.
Ray, thank you for being here. Thank you very much.
Glad to be here. Good program.
Okay, it's only starting. We have some birthdays this week. Glenn Steenberger, April 26th. And then membership anniversaries. Joyce Poling, 31 years in Rotary, 11 with our club. And Glenda Murray, who's here, 29 years.
Wow.
Wonderful. Past President Glenda Murray. And let's see. Okay, just a little bit of time for some updates. I would like to encourage all of our members to maintain social connection with fellow Rotarians and others in this club and elsewhere. These are excellent times for checking in with friends and getting to know new people also. So phone calls and emails should be expected and welcome at this time as we mark the 7th week since we last met in the Georgian Room on March 10th. Join us at our next Rotary Zoom Cafe to socialize. So we're having them weekly on Thursdays from 7 to 8 p.m. This past week, we had around a dozen Rotarians sharing some time and some beverage. Now, anyone have any happy dollars? Anything to be happy about? Martha?
I will go.
Kate, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, Martha. I'm happy because on May 11th, I'll be starting a graduate certificate program in the Higher Education and Student Affairs Department. So I am excited to be back in a class.
Wow.
Congratulations. And I'm happy because we did brave a trip to May's greenhouse and bought some things, and I have all of them in the ground except for the 2 roses, which will take me a little longer. And Patrick is almost finished with a drainage project that we've been talking about for a year. And before it rains, he will have it done. So yay.
Okay. And Martha?
Yeah. I'm just in awe how well these meetings are going. And I just really wanted to give some happy thoughts and happy dollars for the people who have made this transition. As Aaron had just mentioned, you know, it was less than 2 months ago that we were meeting in person. But Ashley Sullivan, our president-elect, has certainly been instrumental. Alan Barker, what would we do without you? And with that amazing reflection today, thank you. Michael Shermus, you've just done this extraordinary job too, and Katie Beck and Jim Bright, and all of you helping to keep Aaron sane, which helps keep me sane, so I appreciate that. But I'm just really delighted with this. We've got a thing going here. That's it.
Hey, who's next?
I have, Aaron, I have happy dollars. We go hiking every day with our pup, and it is just a wonderful thing to be doing at this time, to be out in the sunshine and even sometimes in the rain, but just to be outside and taking these hikes and being in the park and what have you. It's really worth a lot of happy dollars at this time.
Excellent.
I'd
I
like
want
to
to say
say
hi to Martha Wales and Jim Sims, John Diltz, and Tina.
I'm Martha.
Oh. So who's next?
Well, I'd like to say something.
Okay, Steve.
Okay. I'm happy for 2 reasons. One, the beautiful weather outside is going to let us go out on our pontoon boat this afternoon on Monroe, so I'm pretty happy about that. It's only the 2nd time this year. But more importantly, I'm happy about the people in our club who have support Shelley Yoder's bid for state senator. I've had some really response from several of you, and if any of you would want to help contribute, I can give you the address. So you can just email me after the meeting. That's what I'm happy about, that's all. And I love the wonderful reflection like everybody else. That was fantastic, Elaine.
Okay, I want to welcome Gus Shackles, and who else hasn't been? Well, Kyla and Trent Deckard are both here. Our comic conspiracy over there. Welcome.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else for happy dollars? Okay. Well, let's move on forward with our program then. And I'm going to have Charlotte Zitlow now introduce our very special guest.
I want to say we have a very patient speaker today. That was such a wonderful program, Elaine, that you presented to us. I hope you can bottle that and share it with other people, because that's too good for one show. Anyway, I'm very, very happy today to introduce Jane Rogan, who's originally from England, from Cheshire, where I thought they only had cats, but they don't. They have weavers and other dairy farming as well. I don't know, you didn't catch my reference to the Cheshire cat. None of you knows Alice in Wonderland. I think Alice in Wonderland is where we are today in many ways, because we're down the rabbit hole, but maybe we'll find the door out. I'm confident we will. So anyway, Jane is here from Cheshire and came over 23 years ago to the United States and is a Hoosier by choice. That's self-confession. She's been working at IU since that period, that whole period, working with undergraduates and graduate students. And she's committed to that kind of work. But now we have a program at IU. Kyla knows, Kyla's another member. We have a program at IU that reaches out into the communities around us. I think sometimes I've always wondered when IU was going to connect with the people around us, with the world around us, not in a way of town and ground, but of being resources for the challenges of the area around us, which is a challenging area. We have, as you know, not very good soil around here. We've got hills and so forth. So we are not really predestined to be an agricultural community. And the hills are here, and we have limestone, and that's a challenge because there's not the market for limestone there used to be. But IU has decided, under the aegis, I believe, of Lauren Robel, that IU should be more a member of the community and should get out there and find out what needs the communities have, and figure out ways that we might be interactive and helpful to the communities. So Jane is working with the, what is it, sustainable living programs. She'll describe them through the gosh, I knew I'd forget. The
Center for Rural Engagement.
Center for Rural Engagement. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Came from a different voice. For the Center for Rural Engagement, which I think is a real move in the right direction for Indiana University to become a true state university, which we are not always aware of. So I want to introduce to you Jane Rogan, a wonderful, very fun and interesting lady from Cheshire. And I want her to see her smile. Okay, Cheshire, I'm not Cheshire. Jane, come on. Oh, well, anyway, you know.
All right, Cheshire in the house. So thank you, Charlotte, for your lovely introduction and your kind words. And thank you, everyone, for having me here today. Just a couple of notes before I get started. The first note is never, ever follow Alan Barker anywhere at any time, anything, because there is no possible way. This is going to be a sore disappointment to you all based on what you just saw from Alan. So settle into your discomfort now. And then I just want to say my happy dollars and what I'm happy about today is I actually got dressed in a full work attire today, and I even put earrings in for you all because I wanted to make my best Rotary impression. And I also want to recognize that it's only when I get on Skype that I really see how desperately I could use a haircut. So hopefully you'll bear with me on that front too. I want to talk today, as Charlotte mentioned, about our initiative at Indiana University through our Center for Rural Engagement. I direct a program called Sustaining Hoosier Communities. And I'm going to talk to you today about what that is, what we do, how we get that work done, and what kind of results we see. So in a nutshell, for those of you who don't know, the Center for Rural Engagement was started a little over 2 years ago, excuse me. I'm getting ahead of myself. 2 years ago, we are the recipient of a large grant from the Lilly Foundation to get this work started to support our local communities. Kyla Cox-Deckard is our communications chief, so she is sitting in the room, and I am absolutely hoping she chimes in when I put my foot in my mouth and say the wrong thing, as I can count on Kyla to set me straight on all things. So when the center opened up, our Sustaining Hoosier Communities initiative had already gotten its start. We had engaged our first community in the 2017-18 school year. And we had been planning for about 8 months prior to that. And when the census started, we were fortunate that the census sort of brought our initiative into the Center for Rural Engagement, and Sustaining Hoosier Communities has been able to continue working in our rural communities. So just give you a little snapshot of what we do here. So Sustaining Hoosier Communities is primarily a community engaged teaching program. We work with faculty and students across the entire university, and those faculty and students adopt a community identified project into their course for the semester, and they work on that project for the semester, or sometimes even 2 semesters, to solve a problem or look at an issue that the community itself has identified. The program itself is part of the EPIC network, and EPIC stands for Educational Partnerships for Innovation in Communities, which is a mouthful. But the EPIC network is a US nonprofit that really helps to support and promulgate these kinds of community and university partnerships. We joined EPIC in 2016-17 and started our first engagement in Lawrence County, so with Bedford and Mitchell as the chief recipients of the work that we were doing, and have subsequently worked in Lawrence, Orange, Green, we went through a few colors there, and are going to be partnering with Washington County, which is Salem, as its largest town, in the upcoming academic year. Some of the really important things to remember about the work that we're doing is that we only work on community-initiated projects, which is a little different perhaps than some university community partnerships in the past. And faculty members must take on a course, take a project into a course that they know they're already going to be teaching. We recognize that doing community-engaged teaching is it's a tough road to hoe for faculty. It's a lot of additional work. And so we don't want faculty to create new courses. We want to see what we can do to fit projects into courses that are already on the books to be taught. Without our actually trying, we've basically created the largest rural iteration of this kind of program in the country and actually across the world. There are universities in Africa and in Israel, and some possibilities to open up in Asia. And we are the largest rural iteration. Most other universities who do this kind of work in urban settings. So they might partner with a larger city or a small town, on the outskirts of a city to do this kind of work. So over this last few years, since 2017-18 school year, about 1,900 students have taken part in a class that has been working towards community identified projects. And when we calculate the rough number of hours that means that students are contributing towards local communities, it's over 120,000 hours that students are putting into the community, which is a pretty significant, pretty significant number. And we were very fortunate in the 2019 and that academic year to the 18-19 academic year to be nominated, and we won the Outstanding Program Award for EPIC-N, which was a surprise to us because we're constantly learning in this process, and it was a nice accolade for us to be recognized, and also to know that we're I think getting things right. The kinds of projects that we work on are very diverse. We aren't just, when you think about working with community development and working in communities, I think sometimes folks might think we just do, city planning, that kind of thing. Those aspects are there, but we also work in health, we work in the arts, we work interdisciplinary, we work with wellness programs, pretty much you name it. We've had computer engineering programs as well. Whatever the community is looking for, we try to help them resolve that issue. So I want to talk a little bit about how we do our work and what some of the underlying principles are behind our work. We fundamentally believe that what we're doing has to be asset-based community development. I think universities over time, and I'm probably sure many of you have heard stories or know them firsthand yourselves, sometimes haven't worked very well with communities. And so what we've adopted for ourselves is this ladder of citizen participation. It was written in 1969 by Lee Arnstein. And when she put this together, she was I think, rather critical in some probably justifiable ways about the role of the university and the traditional roles it has tended to play in community. And we want to make sure that when we are partnering with our communities, that we start in that higher order citizen power rank of this citizen participation ladder. We want to make sure that we are absolutely including partners in our communities at every stage, from when we are starting to work in communities to when we are actually actively developing projects, and then when projects are happening in collaboration with our faculty and students, that there are community members who have control of those projects as we work through them. So it's essential to us that we start at partnership and we keep working up that ladder to try to get towards this idea of citizen control. We can only do this work in this way if we build trusting relationships, and those take time. So while we might actually have courses in a community in the fall and spring of an academic year, we've already been partnered with that community for probably since the prior October, November time when they're applying to become our next community. So we've already set up 8 to 10 months of work before a faculty member ever steps foot into a classroom and starts working with students on their project work. We're then with that community for the fall and spring semesters. We do some continuation work typically in the summer for a couple of free projects that might need some additional attention from the Center for Rural Engagement and from our faculty and students. And then we're obviously also developing the next community that we're going to be working with. So at any point in time, we can be working with a past, a present, and a upcoming community getting this work done. But really that notion of time and investment in trusting relationships is at the core of what we do. And I think it's become sort of essential to us that we recognize that everything we do has to be in partnership. We have eradicated the words to do things for communities and also to do things to communities. We're not in the business of doing that. That would be the sort of lower order things, but everything that we do is in partnership. That's at least what we strive for. So in addition to this idea of kind of making sure that we're partnering with communities, we also want to make sure that we're using this asset-based community-driven process, which looks at appreciative inquiry. And this is just a little example I had come up with for a presentation to the Indiana Campus Compacts earlier this year. But if you imagine an issue in a community, and so the issue is here, and this is a real one, that kids are loitering downtown, and they're a problem for store owners and also for people who want to go shopping in the downtown area. And the local downtown business association perceives this as an issue. And of course, what normally happens is they go, this is a problem, kids are a problem, someone should do something about it. And the Downtown Business Association might go talk to the mayor and the police chief and say, somebody needs to do something, but it's really unclear what the something is and who's going to do it. If we use the asset-based community-driven process with appreciative inquiry, we're going to reframe this not as a problem, but as an opportunity to leverage assets in the community, to work collaboratively together, and then to really think about what are the interests and needs of the community that need to be met. So it's not just one-sided where it's the Downtown Business Association that's mad at kids. You also have to recognize, well, maybe kids don't have enough going on, that they don't have enough activities. And so maybe it's trying to find what assets that exist in the community and meshing them together. So instead of the problem being kids loiter downtown, we think about this in like with our imagination, and we think in a future-oriented way. Imagine what our town would be like if kids had a place to go and they had a good experience, and shoppers also had a good experience. How could we make that happen? And that sense of collaboration then that comes in, and building on the assets that already exist in the community. And then this becomes a really important part of how we do our work. Asset-driven, collective action, and looking at needs and reframing them outside of that whole problem schema, but how are you looking at needs and sort of working towards a solution that might be a little bit more positive. Tends to bring more people to the table. And that becomes very, very important to us as how we go into communities and then start working with communities on asset mapping, because that's the first step in our being able to understand what communities have, what resources are available, and how we can tap into them. So in order to do that part, we have created our own asset map. It has 10 categories in it. And these 10 categories are the most common things that we see in our rural communities. So we primarily work in Southwest Central Indiana. That's the 11 county region that starts with Monroe County in the top and then goes down to the river at Crawford County, ending sort of in a straight line. And so obviously we see that our communities are not homogenous. There are certain things that exist in some communities and not in others, but the types of things that exist are relatively commonly seen in different communities. This asset map has become something that we use in community. We encourage our community residents to participate in this process with us to really get a sense of their assets. And that's important to us because then we're not simply looking at what political leaders or business owners are thinking about. We're really kind of challenging ourselves to involve all levels of society, all community members into our work. So as you can see here, we have things like education represented, health and wellness, housing, leadership, and asset mapping is kind of messy. People write down lots of ideas and then you have to do something with that. But for us, the primary reason for doing this work is to expose to us what's important to the community. And then secondarily, the community members who have written these asset maps are then asked to think about a project that they think that we could work on with them that would leverage some of these assets in the community. And the way that we do that is very simply, we hold community meetings. So this is a very fuzzy picture, deliberately so we can't recognize anybody in the picture, but this is what we do. We go into communities and we have meetings with community members and they talk about their communities. They list and discuss their assets, and then collectively at small tables and in groups, they really think about how to link assets to projects, and then what are the needs and what's the future that they imagine that if we're working on a project, it's going to get them towards this imagined future. And the example I would share with that would be something like a small park in a small community probably has some outdated play equipment. So the immediate need that people think about is, we need new play equipment. But what we're trying to get them to think about is to imagine that future state, and also to think about what maybe the underlying issue is that causes the need for play equipment, and how do we address the underlying issue. So if it's that the play equipment is old and kids don't want to use it because it's old and it doesn't seem very safe, then what we're really trying to address is how do we create a safe environment where kids and parents feel welcome in a space in a park where they can have fun, recreate, play, and burn off some steam at the end of the day, which I think we all probably need more than ever right now. So we try to get our community members to really think about this sort of future-oriented framing of how they think about what they have in their community and how they want to utilize it. We create all kinds of ways to represent those assets, and so this is just one example. And this was created after we had 3 community meetings in Washington County, which is Salem, Indiana. And so we went to 3 different communities and asked people just to tell us what goes on in their communities, what their assets are, what do they perceive are the strengths of their community. And you can see here that the YMCA is featured, and obviously the size of the text is relative to the number of responses that are there. But you've got the YMCA, you've got a lot of outdoor assets, including Lake Celinda, Delaney Park, but then you also have things like food banks and farmers markets. So those things are, come out. The reason that we do this and we display this and we share all of this information with our faculty is that we want to make sure that we're working on the projects that are of the utmost importance to the community and are responding to the things that they know are strengths for them. It does us no good to work with the community and work on something that they then, after we've gone and our teaching commitment is over, that they don't have the capacity to continue. And so we want to make sure that we're setting them up for future success. And the way to do that is to focus on the things that they already have that are working well and help to make them work even better. So I want to talk a little bit about our students. So as you saw, we've had over 1,900 students participate in these programs since we started. And one of the great things about this work is that we are talking about local communities. Communities are local to Indiana University. So we are inevitably going to have students in our classrooms who are from the communities that we represent. So this is Sarah Murphy. She participated in our first Sustaining Hoosier Communities partnership with Lawrence County. And Sarah is from Lawrence County. She's from Bedford. And it was amazing for her, as you can see, it's this little quote from her, being in a class that is closely involved with my community is really awesome. It makes my major feel more tangible. Now, Sarah was a Parks and Rec major, and she was working on a project at the Avoca Fish Hatchery, which is just outside of Bedford in the small community of Avoca. And she became a kind of resident expert for her class on what the community is like and you know, what it's like to live in a rural community. And I think that's a really important thing for particularly our rural students. Sometimes they don't feel particularly sophisticated when they are in class with students who are from Chicago and New York and wherever else, the big cities. And they sometimes feel that their small community life might not feel quite as important. But then when we put them in the classroom and then all of a sudden they're expert on their own communities, it's a great confidence booster for our students. Sarah, I should point out, being from Bedford and a Parks and Rec major, really wanted to go work in a state park or a national park. And this experience for her working with her home community really taught her that she could find joy working in her own community and working for that community. And she subsequently, after graduation, taken a job working at Spring Mill State Park, which is in her backyard. And she's working as an interpreter in the park. So a nice success story that we keep a smart student who feels committed to her community. We keep her in Indiana, which is always good news for us regarding the brain drain. I want to share with you just 3 examples of projects that we've done in a couple of communities, just to give you a sense of the diversity, but then also to show you how the work that we do doesn't end when we are done teaching and when the students have delivered whatever the deliverable item might be, a logo, branding, a map, a report. When we're done with that work and that's given back to the community, there's an opportunity for the Center for Rural Engagement and our faculty and students to continue to interact with the community partners that they've worked with. And so here are just a few examples of that. So here we have Professor John Kiesler in the middle and the sheriff of Lawrence County, Mike Branham, excuse me. And what Professor Kiesler's Masters of Social Work students did was they did a rather large survey to figure out what a community-centric approach to the opioid crisis might look like in Lawrence County. What actual physical resources are there for people who are struggling with addiction? Why do they use them? Why do they not get used? How do they get communicated to people? Who communicates the opportunities and availability of these resources? This Masters of Social Work class actually did its work over 2 full semesters, so an entire academic year. And then Professor Kiesler finished up the work of kind of like, you know, the students had done all the survey work and we had all the data, but we needed to turn it into something. And that's what Professor Kiesler did over the course of the summer. The end result of that is that the work that Professor Kiesler did and the presentations that he made have gone into a federal grant, and that's really been helpful for us in really figuring out how to respond to opioid planning in the state. So it was a state level response. And so other communities are now using the framework that his students put together to really figure out how to respond in a tailored way to the opioid crisis. So again, and as a class that then led into more work that has also led into some funding opportunities for our communities. This is a lovely example here. This is our nursing students in Orange County, and they are actually in Paoli in the Southern Indiana Community Healthcare Clinic. And the clinic has a lot of residents, as do many of our rural health providers, a lot of residents with chronic health problems. We know in our rural communities that chronic health tends to be a problem, and that's issues of obesity and diabetes and hypertension. And most folks are perhaps not following their treatment protocols as well as they could. And so the nursing students did their clinical rotation in Orange County, and they visited patients of the clinic who the clinic determined had not had sufficient follow-up or had not been making much progress perhaps with their diabetes care. So the students were in pairs and they went to visit patients in their home settings. This was great. This has led to all kinds of things for both the students and the School of Nursing, but also for how we think about social determinants of health. It became very apparent to the students very quickly that some of the reasons why residents were facing diabetes and obesity and hypertension were, poor diet and not enough activity and exercise, and generally a sense of isolation, living in very remote parts of the rural community without ready access to transportation. So the nursing students then were very aware of the fact that these social determinants of health were sort of beyond their remit. They were beyond their ability to help, and they were dealing with clients who maybe had damaged homes that couldn't be repaired, and that was really impeding their clients getting better. And so the following academic year, John Kiesler, who you just saw from social work, partnered with the School of Nursing. And so they put their nursing students and Masters of Social Work students together. So the social work students took case histories and tried to determine how to get better access to all kinds of social services to help with the health and well-being of the patients. And then of course the nursing students were primarily then focused on really tending to the more medical needs of the incident medical needs of the patients themselves. But again, a great partnership with a great community client. And then we were able to kind of have a longer response with them that went over 2 academic years. But also then you can see the university isn't just thinking about how do we go into community, but we're really looking at what can we do to change curriculum even so that we can have more of these really intensive experiential opportunities for students, because they're such solid learning opportunities. So I think the last little example I'll share here is in fact the Avoca Fish Hatchery. So there you see Sarah Murphy, and she should be familiar to you who you saw her before. And this is Professor James Farmer. For those of you who know James or might not know James, he runs the campus farm on the corner there of, where is that, on 10th Street by the post office. And his class was the one that looked at this Avoca Fish Hatchery. And the Indiana Department of Natural Resources wanted to rid itself of the fish hatchery, and they wanted to give the deed to some kind of governmental agency within Lawrence County. Unfortunately, Bedford was the only place that had a Parks and Rec board, and the students' first determination was unless there was some kind of county-wide Parks and Rec entity, they weren't going to be able to deed this property over to the community. So the students in his class sent out, I think, they got 700 responses to a survey. I swear Lawrence County loves the survey like no other county we worked with. I'm grateful for that. They got 700 responses back to this survey, and those responses really helped them to understand what the community really wanted for this site moving forward. And so the students then wrote up papers on what they thought the future could look like and what were the immediate steps that the community needed to take. From the results of their work, the community then, the Bloomington Parks and Rec Board, the outgoing mayor, Shona Gurgis, they were able to write a grant to ROI, which granted them right at the end of their last year, a $125,000 grant so that they can establish a county parks foundation. And then that would be the entity that would then take on Avoca and start working towards getting, really securing a positive future for that. It's a beautiful piece of property if you haven't been out there. It's just off of Highway 37 and it's an amazing property. So here are students, on the site there, and they were actually trying to estimate the age of trees and those kinds of things to sort of think about how they would imagine the asset in the future. So just a few examples for you of the kinds of work we're doing, the central role that our faculty play, but also the really important role that our staff plays in setting up these trusting relationships in community and really getting out there to understand at a very deep level what the needs are of our communities and how to respond to them. So with that, I am going to turn it back over to Charlotte. I've left my contact information up here. You're more than welcome to email me, call me, and my number rings to my cell phone anyway. So even though I'm not sitting at my desk.
I want to go back on. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jane. When I took on the program committee, I decided that I wanted to show how IU impacted the state in various ways that we might not know. And this is certainly one of them. And also, we've heard from Lori McRobbie and her work with the wives of the presidents. And we've heard from our own member, Jim Capshew, about the involvement that Herman B. Wells had with the community when he was president. And I think in the future to hear from Patrick O'Meara about the international relationship to the community. But it seems to me the work that Jane and the Center for Rural Engagement and its mother organization, I can't remember all the layers, but Kyla can fill me in maybe. In any case, that they may play a serious role in our relationship to the state, which I think was probably long in coming and very welcome at this point. Thank you, Jane, for all your hard work.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, are there questions?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, Timothy.
I'm Tim Jessen. I've been a pastor in both Lawrence County and Greene County. I know those counties. I've preached in Salem and around Paoli. These counties are very different. What makes them different in terms of their ability to move forward or stay mired in the past?
Wow, that's a really big question. They are different, and the personalities are different. The ways that they interpret the role of their government agencies is really different. I think Orange County itself, when you talk about Paoli, is a fascinating case study in that there isn't a single mayor in any one of those towns, so they do not have leadership at the local level of the kind that a mayor brings, including staffing, to really look at and address issues. So that becomes a critical issue. And so what that does for us in a place like Orange County is it makes us have to find who the leaders are that aren't just using that sort of umbrella title of like elected leader. Who are the movers and shakers who can get things done? Who are the people who know what's going on in the community and who are trusted by other members of the community? We have to remember that when we go in and we say we want to have community meetings, no one's going to show up unless we have trusted agents in the community who are partnered with us to call on their colleagues and their partners to come and meet and talk with us so we can start building up that sense of trust. But no, you're absolutely right to point out these communities are very different one from the next. Greene County is a fascinating case in point that one side doesn't talk to the other. The eastern part of Greene County, which is the small farms that are very hilly and folks who are really struggling, and then you've got the western part of the county, which is huge farms and massive agriculture, and they don't look alike, and they also have coal mines over there too. So they're very different. There's a very strong union presence in the western part of the county and not at all in the eastern part of the county. And then that changes, of course, the political dynamics of what goes on. So, these are all very complicated pieces that come together in the mix, which is why asset mapping is a fundamental piece of what we do, because there's no way that you can read a stats sheet to see what the unemployment rate is and what the median income is and actually get a true sense of what that community looks like and feels like.
Thank you, Jane.
And
would you mind could you hang around here?
Absolutely, of course, Eric. I'm happy to do
while
that.
we wrap up the meeting, because I think
sure.
there are more questions, and I don't want to cut them off. So
No.
we'll wrap up the meeting and then stay here for more questions.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, Jane. This is a great presentation. It's near and dear to our hearts because Rotarians in this district, we have a very diverse, very significantly rural district that we're in, southern Indiana. And so there are lots of clubs out there who will want to be hearing from you and who you can access through Rotary. Hopefully we'll do everything we can to make sure that those connections are made.
I've already been to the Bloomfield meeting once.
Excellent. So now, in honor of today's celebration of service, we'll provide this quarter's local charity donation to Centerstone, a United Way agency. And Ashley will introduce the next week's program to us.
Hey everyone, our next celebration of service will be May 5th on Zoom. Our program will be Bloomington Rotary Club's presentation of $1,500 scholarships to 4 high school students led by Scholarship Committee Chair Matt Stitchinger. These scholarships were substantially supported by funds donated to the Bloomington Rotary Foundation, and you'll be hearing much more about the foundation in the coming weeks, so keep your eyes open for that.
Yep.
Thank you, President-elect Ashley. My thought of the week is, and some of you will be familiar with this, and it ties so well into the 4-way test which will follow. It's a quote from Gandhi, who said, "Happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony."
Nice.
And following up on that, please join me for the 4-way test. Of the things we think, say, do. First,
is it the truth?
The truth. Second, is it fair to all concerned?
Third, would it build goodwill and better
friendships?
friendships?
And fourth, will it be beneficial
to all concerned?
And fifth, is it fun?
I want to quickly mention that Mahatma Gandhi spent time in Durban as well, just to let you all know.
Elma,
Yes, yes.
I wanted you to have the.
So questions or follow-up?
You want to end up?
You covered everything, Jane.
Okay, Kyla, did you have anything to add?
No, Jane did a great job.
Really excellent.
That was great. Yes, thank you all. Appreciate it.
I
Yes,
have a
thank you.
question. Have you ever considered becoming a part of a national organization called Imagining America? It's a consortium of colleges and universities. It's been around for at least 20 years, currently based at UC Davis. And it's a consortium of universities who learn from each other about the work that they're doing in communities. And I think the Center for Rural Engagement would be a unique addition to the national conversation. I don't think that IU has ever been a member, although when I was the head of the Bloomington Area Arts Council, back when we had one, someone sent me to a meeting of Imagining America that took place at University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. So it's kind of arts focused, and I know that there is a quality of life / arts focus at the center. So I would highly recommend that you look it up. They do a national convening.
Okay. Well, thank you. And what were they called again?
Imagining America.
Okay, Imagining America. Perfect.
Thanks. And Jane, I've got another organization that you'd be a perfect match for.
Oh yeah,
Rotary.
what's that?
We'd love to have you anytime and all the time.
Thank you, Aaron.
Jim, do you?
Okay,
do you
I'm not
any-
sure. Do members get a commission when new members join? Is it like? Because if so, I think that Kyla Cox-Deckard should be getting the promo pack of whatever that's on offer this month. Is it a toaster oven this month?
It's just bragging rights.
Okay.
I'm going to accept on the behalf of you being the speaker.
And in this community, bragging rights is a big deal.
I invited you.
Jim
That's
Bright,
right. And Charlotte has to get kudos too because she invited me. That's true.
Absolutely. And Jim Bright, I wanted to ask for your input on the district and what needs there are out there that the Center for Rural Engagement might be a valuable connection for.
Well, Jane, I'm glad to hear you were already at Bloomfield. Now you've been at Bloomington. There are 32 or 30 more clubs out there in Southern Indiana alone. So you need to take your show on the road. And oh, by the way, I think Alon Barker needs to take his show. Lots.
But Alon's show must come with tissues, I fear.
Yes.
Well, mine too.
That's for sure. But quick question for you, Jane. Of all the projects and initiatives undertaken by your group, which one do you consider at this point to be most impactful? And is there one out there that you consider to have maybe the most upside potential at this time?
Yeah, I'd say that our nursing program, for me, as you know, as Charlotte mentioned in my introduction, or rather in her introduction of me, I've worked at the university since 1990. Here, Jim Sims better not say what years we were on Bloomington Professional Council together, because he will give away my age if he does. But hopefully my secret is safe.
We were youngsters.
We were. I think the nursing program is the one that to me has the biggest upside, because it isn't just about putting nursing students for short term. It's got two sides to it, right? It's about how do we really imagine caring in community, in very disparate communities where people are a long way from one another and don't have access to this, what we're doing. They wouldn't be able to do what we're doing right now with, internet connectivity doesn't exist in a lot of our communities. So really thinking about how do we do what I would consider old-fashioned healthcare, right? Where you go door to door and you go nurse people where they live. I think the other side to it is that then pushes our university to really think about its curriculum and really think about the opportunities it's providing for students. The literature tells us that if we want students to graduate in professional degree programs like medicine and nursing, and to go work in rural communities, they must have the experience of rural communities at some point during their practical or clinical placements. If they don't, they can't imagine what that will look like. And we will never solve the shortage of doctors and nurses in rural communities if we don't show them while they're in training that being a physician or being a nurse in a rural community is an elevated position. I mean, you could, not in these days and age, but in normal times, I think you could walk into any supermarket in a rural setting and see people wearing scrubs. It would just be an ordinary thing for you to do, particularly if you're near a hospital or some other medical facility. When you walk into a rural community and you see a person in scrubs, they probably, they are the elevated status individual, right? So if you're practicing medicine or nursing in rural communities, you're going to have a lot more latitude in what you do, because you're not going to have a huge support team and network of other providers around you. And that's very appealing to certain types of personalities and certain types of students. But if we don't give them that experience and demonstrate to them what it is to be in rural communities and what their needs are, they will always sort of, as we all will as humans, will default to what's most familiar to us. And that obviously for most people is not rural settings. So that to me is a project that has the ability to change hearts and minds in our students, to change the curriculum for our university, and that ultimately we could actually have an impact on how healthcare is provided in this state, at least.
It seems to me one of the things we should really have happy dollars about is that we're talking about community these days instead of just individual.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we have to do. We're coming to understand how important it is to consider ourselves as parts of community that have an obligation to that community. This is a wonderful, wonderful process. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Charlotte.
And Liz, did you want to mention the Workers' Memorial Day?
Sure. I just wanted to remind folks, I put it in the chat box, but today is Workers' Memorial Day. It happens every year. The National AFL-CIO honors workers across the country for the sacrifice they have made on their job, either through injury or death. And this year, as I put in the chat box, just seems more relevant than ever.
Absolutely. Yes.
Any other questions before we close? Anyone else here who knows Jane Rogan?
Jane, I do have a question. Can you just name for us the counties that you've already done, and
absolutely,
has there one been selected for next year, assuming next year can be worked out?
Yeah. So our pilot engagement was in Lawrence County.
Right.
It was a nice, easy community because it's right next door. And then the year after, we were in Orange County, which is just south, obviously, of Lawrence. This year, currently, we're in Greene County, which again is just next door, but it is a long way to go from one side of Greene County to the other. It is a big community. And yes, we have selected our community for next academic year, and that is Washington County. Salem is the county seat, so that's south and east of Lawrence County. And it actually borders on Lawrence and Orange, and so
Yeah,
a somewhat familiar stomping ground. So
yeah. Thank you for repeating that for me.
no, you're very welcome, Glenda.
So Jane, thank you so much.
Thanks, Erin. It's so nice to see you.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yes, it has.
Our sustainability program can.
That's right. That's right.
And Alan, thank you again.
Yes.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, and Wendell, I didn't say hi to you before, and Betsy, and
Is this a smaller group?
Well, it is now.
it is now. It
Now,
wasn't as
there are
large as the week before.
Right now we have 22. I think we had about 54 or 55 as a max today.
I
Yeah.
wanted to say two more things to a small group. That is that we have an offer, Alan, for help from Lesotho or Lesotho. A Rotary club there has asked for help, and I wanted to mention that to you now.
Oh, sure.
Send you an email.
Sure.
I forwarded it to the international committee, but
Yeah, I'd be happy to help with that. Just let me know
I
what I
thought
can
you'd
do.
be interested in that, and outstanding.
Yeah,
Sure.
our global
Okay.
scholar, our global scholar in Berlin was a Peace Corps volunteer in Lesotho as well.
Right.
So we've got some connections there.
Yeah, I have a cousin who works in Lesotho, so I could potentially connect up with him as well.
But the question I had to Jane is, if she's still there, is she
I'm right
there?
here.
To follow up on my earlier question, for example, Owen County has always seemed to me to be much more progressive and open than Greene County. You know, I just can't imagine some of the things they do in Owen County would ever go over in Greene. And I just think that's an interesting topic of study and discussion. Is it the leadership? Is it the political leaders? Is it the community leaders? Or what is it that leads one community to be able to really go forward and others just start to lag back and
Yeah.
old
Right. I
conservative
think
ways?
that's a really interesting question. I do think it comes down to leadership. I think it comes down to I think there are many pieces to this. It's all incredibly complex systems, right? That you can't kind of unpack and point to one thing, because then there's also everything's connected to everything else.
And an overwhelming issue is maybe they're having the kind of experience they want. So it's not that we should, that we're the ones who
Lay
are
our
judging.
expectations on
And
them.
that's the
Absolutely.
nature of the program, is to come if you want to ask for assistance and facilitation in
Yeah.
some way. But, Rotary for sure is not political, and, we're just going to support all the communities in a way that they want us to.
That's a really great point, Erin. That was something that came up recently, somebody asked me a question in a national organization about somebody who doesn't work in rural communities, about working in rural communities, and like, doesn't everybody think you're like you're from the university, so you must be a communist? And, no. And the one thing that I'll say is that going to communities, building trusting relationships, and we are working on the things that communities want us to work on. We are not forcing any agenda of our own. The only agenda we would possibly force is by not selecting projects we thought were not in the best interest of the community. For example, if they decided to rip up Main Street and put a coal strip mine down the middle of it, we're not going to probably work on that project with them. A myriad other projects that have a sense of positive well-being at the end of them. And the issue of politics, quite surprisingly, doesn't come up. It just doesn't. That's not what we're there for.
I would like to add something. I worked in those counties at one point, politically, I understand, but what I realized that these counties are full of human beings, and it depends a great deal on who those people are who've been there and who've been doing whatever they do over the years, and they've shaped the community, and one has to understand that as well. The human beings that are there. Do you hear me?
Thank
Yes,
you,
I agree
Charlotte.
with you.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And thank you, Jane and Alan and
Thank you, Jane.
Jane, I want to quickly thank you as well. Your work is spectacular and is
Oh,
having
thanks,
a huge
Sarah.
impact on what we do in the Jacob School of Music as well. So thank you very, very
Excellent.
much.
Thank you very
Okay,
much for your
and
support.
Sandy Keller didn't mention you before.
Sandy.
So have a good lunch or a good evening. Have both, I hope.
I'm having
Great
mine
to
right
see
now.
you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Aaron.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye
Good to
now.
see
Take
everyone.
care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, Jim.
Thank you, Jane.
I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now as well.
Thanks, Elaine.